The young woman walked slowly down the narrow street of her town, feeling the weight of every eye on her. She kept her head low, her heart pounding with embarrassment and fear. The whispers followed her wherever she went, and the stares felt like they would burn her skin. She could hear pieces of conversations from people passing by. They shook their heads and muttered words she did not want to hear. Her hands were cold, and her chest felt tight as though it could not hold all the shame she carried. She had never imagined feeling so small in a place she once called home. She had made a mistake that had changed everything in her life. It was not something she had wanted to happen, but it had happened all the same. People had judged her without knowing the full story. They had spoken harshly and made assumptions that left her feeling unwanted and alone. Her family had said things that cut deep into her soul, and friends she had trusted now looked at her with pity or suspicion. The walls of her home had once felt safe, but now they felt like a trap. Every familiar corner reminded her of how far she had fallen in the eyes of the people she cared about, with nowhere left to turn. She began to pack the few belongings she could carry. Her hands trembled as she folded clothes and tucked them into a worn bag. She did not know where she would go, but she knew she could not stay. The town had become a cage, and the judgment she faced there felt unbearable. Leaving was terrifying, but remaining felt impossible. She looked around one last time at the place she had grown up in. The houses, the streets, the small shops, and the familiar faces all seemed foreign to her now. She wondered if she would ever be able to return without remembering the shame that had driven her away. The journey out of town was quiet at first. She walked along dirt roads that led toward the hills surrounding the area. The air was crisp and carried the scent of trees and soil. She breathed deeply, trying to calm the storm inside her. Memories of laughter and happier days came and went quickly, reminding her of what she had lost. She wondered if anyone would remember her with kindness, or if they would only remember the mistakes she had made. The thought made her heart ache. She did not want pity. She did not want excuses. She only wanted a place where she could breathe freely without the weight of judgment pressing down on her as she walked further from the town. The houses grew fewer, and the land became wilder. She noticed the small animals darting through the underbrush and the birds flying overhead. The mountains in the distance loomed like silent guardians, and she felt a strange pull toward them. They seemed far away and untouchable, yet there was something comforting about their presence. The idea of being surrounded by nature away from people who had hurt her with words seemed like a dream she might be able to reach. She found a small clearing near a stream where she could rest. The water ran clear and cold, and she dipped her hands into it, letting the coolness wash over her. For a moment, the tension in her body eased, and she allowed herself to simply watch the water move. She thought about how life had brought her to this point, and how uncertain the future seemed. There was fear, but there was also a spark of hope. She knew she could not change the past, but perhaps she could find a new path forward. The mountains felt like a symbol of that path, solid and enduring. Something she could hold on to even when everything else felt unstable. As evening approached, she built a small fire using twigs and dry leaves she found nearby. The flames flickered and danced, casting shadows around the clearing. She sat close to the warmth, feeling a sense of safety that had been missing for weeks. She thought about the people she had left behind and the life she had abandoned. She wondered if they would understand why she had gone, or if they would only see her leaving as proof of her failure. The uncertainty was heavy, but being in the mountains brought a strange kind of peace. She felt like she could breathe again, even if only for a little while. Sleep came fitfully. She woke to the sounds of birds and the rustle of leaves in the wind. The mountains stretched around her, silent and patient. She realized that the journey ahead would not be easy. She had no home, no familiar comforts, and the people she had trusted most were no longer in her life. But she also realized that she had the strength to continue moving forward. She had survived the harsh words and the cold stares, and she had made the decision to leave. That choice, though painful, was hers and hers alone. She felt a small sense of pride in that, a recognition that she could take control of her own life even when others had tried to define it. For her, each day, she walked further into the mountains, learning to navigate the terrain, finding food and water, and listening to the quiet sounds of the natural world. She discovered small joys in watching the sun rise over the peaks, in the way the wind moved through the trees, and in the soft songs of birds in the early morning. These small moments began to heal her heart, little by little. She began to talk to herself, to process her feelings and her past. She allowed herself to cry when she needed to, and to feel anger without fear of judgment. The mountains became her companion, patient and unchanging, offering comfort in their steady presence. Despite the isolation, she sometimes felt lonely. The memories of her old life came back unexpectedly, and she longed for someone to share her thoughts with. She missed laughter, conversation, and human touch. The loneliness was difficult, but it also gave her space to think and reflect. She realized that being alone did not have to mean being unhappy. It meant she could listen to herself and understand her own needs, her own desires, and her own worth. For the first time in a long while, she felt a sense of clarity. As though the fog of shame and judgment that had clouded her mind was beginning to lift, one afternoon she came across an old path that led to a small cabin, tucked between the trees. It looked abandoned, but something about it drew her closer. She approached cautiously, listening for any sign of life. The cabin was simple and worn, but it had a sturdy feel to it. She imagined what it would be like to live there, to have a place of her own where she could start over. The idea of a home in the mountains, far from the eyes of those who had shamed her, was appealing. She wondered who might have lived there before, and what stories the walls could tell. The thought gave her a strange comfort, so the cabin itself understood the need for healing and solitude. As the days passed, she explored the area around the cabin. She found a small garden that had once been tended, and a stack of firewood that would keep her warm. She began to feel a sense of belonging, a connection to the land that she had never felt in her old town. She started to repair the cabin, making it her own. Each nail she hammered and each board she replaced was a step toward reclaiming her life. She felt her confidence returning slowly, the shame that had weighed her down beginning to lift. She realized that while the past could not be erased, the future was hers to shape. She could build a life where she felt safe, valued, and at peace. Evenings became her favorite time of day. She would sit outside the cabin watching the sun dip behind the mountains and think about how far she had come. The journey had been painful, but it had also been necessary. She had left behind judgment, cruelty, and misunderstanding, and in their place, she had found quiet strength. She began to dream about the possibilities ahead, imagining a life filled with freedom and healing. The mountains no longer seemed intimidating, but welcoming. They were witnesses to her resilience, silent companions, in a story of survival and hope. She knew the road ahead would still have challenges. Living in the mountains required hard work and resourcefulness. There would be storms, cold nights, and moments of doubt. But she also knew she had faced her deepest fears and survived. She had been sent away in shame, but she was determined to find healing and peace. With each day, she felt a little stronger, a little braver, and a little more certain that she could create a life defined not by mistakes, but by courage, resilience, and the quiet joy of living on her own terms. Young woman woke early to the sound of birds, and the soft rustle of leaves in the wind. She stretched, and felt the cool air on her skin. She looked around at the mountains that surrounded her, and felt a mixture of fear and excitement. The day ahead seemed full of unknowns. But she knew she had to keep moving. She packed a small bag with the few belongings she had and set out along a narrow path that wound through the trees. The forest was quiet, except for the occasional sound of a branch snapping underfoot, or the distant call of an animal. She walked slowly and carefully, her senses alert to everything around her. As she moved deeper into the mountains, she realized how much she needed to learn about living in the wild. She could not rely on anyone else for food or shelter. She found berries and edible plants along the path and drank from small streams that trickled over smooth stones. She remembered some lessons from books she had read and from old survival shows, but nothing prepared her for the reality of being alone. She had to think about every step she took, about where she would sleep and how she would stay safe. She felt tired, but also proud that she could manage on her own. One evening she found a small cave that provided some shelter from the wind and the cold. She gathered leaves and dry grass to make a bed and sat. By the opening, watching the sun sink behind the peaks, the shadows grew long, and the forest became dark and mysterious. She thought about her old life, the people she had left behind, and the mistakes that had driven her away. She felt a wave of sadness and loneliness wash over her. She missed warmth and comfort and the sound of voices. She wondered if she had made the right choice by leaving everything behind. The nights were long and quiet. She heard the wind whistle through the trees and the distant howl of wolves. She learned to stay alert to every sound. Every rustle made her heart beat faster. She remembered stories she had heard about people who got lost or hurt in the mountains. She did not want to be one of them. She built a small fire when she could find enough dry wood and used it to cook small meals. She felt a sense of accomplishment in being able to provide for herself even in difficult circumstances. Days turned into weeks, and she began to find a rhythm. She explored small valleys and climbed rocky slopes. She learned which plants were safe to eat and where to find fresh water. She began to notice patterns in the forest, the way birds moved and where animals came to drink. She used this knowledge to avoid danger and to make her life a little easier. She discovered the beauty of the mountains, the way sunlight filtered through the trees and painted the rocks golden in the morning. Despite the beauty, she sometimes felt fear and loneliness. She missed talking to someone or simply sharing a moment with another person. She had to fight against the urge to turn back toward the town. She reminded herself of why she had left, of the shame and judgment she had faced. She told herself that this time alone was necessary to heal and to find herself. She learned to speak to herself kindly and to give herself patience and understanding. She also began to notice changes within herself. She felt stronger physically from walking long distances and carrying her belongings. She felt more confident in making decisions and solving problems. She realized that the mistakes she had made did not define her entire life. They were a part of her story, but they did not have to control her future. She began to feel a sense of freedom she had never experienced before, a feeling that she could live for herself and not for the approval of others. One morning, she came across a small clearing with a stream running through it. The water was clear and cool, and she knelt to drink. She noticed tracks in the mud that belonged to animals, but also to humans. Someone had been here before, and she wondered who it could be. She felt a mix of curiosity and caution. She decided to follow the stream for a while, hoping it might lead her to more signs of life. She wanted to know if there were others living in the mountains, and if they could help her, or at least show her the way. As she walked, she thought about the stories her grandmother had told her about the mountains. People who lived there often had simple lives, but deep knowledge of the land. They were self-sufficient and resilient. She wondered if she could learn from them and if they could teach her to survive better. She felt a spark of hope that she might find someone who understood her and could offer guidance. She knew it would not be easy to find anyone, and that she would have to be careful, but the thought gave her courage to continue. That evening, she set up a small camp near a cluster of trees. She gathered wood and built a fire. She roasted small pieces of meat she had hunted and felt satisfaction in her ability to feed herself. She watched the stars come out one by one and thought about the vastness of the world around her. She felt small but also connected to something greater. She realized that the mountains were not just a place to hide, but a place to learn and grow. She felt a quiet determination to face whatever challenges came her way. Over the following days, she continued to explore and gather resources. She found a small grove with fruit trees and learned how to store food. For longer periods, she discovered a flat area near the stream where she could sleep safely and began to make it more comfortable. She learned to be patient with herself and with the land around her. Understanding the rhythm of nature became part of her daily life. She felt a sense of accomplishment in knowing that she could survive and adapt even in unfamiliar and challenging conditions. Sometimes she would sit quietly and listen to the sounds of the forest, the wind through the trees, the calls of birds, and the movement of small animals. All seemed to tell her stories. She imagined what life had been like for the people who had lived in these mountains before. She felt a connection to them and to the history of the land. She began to understand that being alone did not mean being abandoned. She was part of a larger world, and that gave her comfort. She also faced moments of fear and doubt. She thought about the town she had left and the people who had shamed her. She wondered if they would ever forgive her, or if she would ever be able to return. She felt a pang of longing for companionship, but reminded herself that this journey was about healing. She needed to find peace within herself before she could reconnect with others. She repeated these thoughts to herself as a way to stay strong and focused. As the days passed, she noticed changes in her body and mind. She became stronger and more agile. She could climb rocky paths with ease and carry heavy loads. She felt a sense of pride in her accomplishments. She also noticed changes in her emotions. She felt less fear and sadness and more confidence and calmness. She began to dream about the future and what she could build for herself in this new life. The mountains no longer seemed frightening but inviting, offering opportunities for growth and discovery. One afternoon, she discovered a hidden path that led to a small hill overlooking a valley. The view took her breath away. She could see the mountains stretching endlessly in every direction. The forests and streams below looked like a painting. She felt a sense of awe and wonder. She realized that despite the hardships she had faced, she had also been given a chance to see the world in a new way. She felt grateful for the experience and for the strength it had given. As the sun set, she returned to her small camp and prepared for the night. She built a fire and sat by it, feeling warmth and security. She thought about the lessons she had learned, about survival, independence, and patience. She realized that she was capable of more than she had ever imagined. She felt a sense of empowerment that came from relying on herself and facing challenges head-on. She knew there would still be difficult days, but she felt ready to meet them with courage and determination. Night came, and she lay on her bed of leaves and grass. She listened to the sounds of the mountains and felt a sense of belonging. She had come a long way from the town that had sent her away in shame. She had found strength and resilience within herself. She knew the journey was far from over, but she also knew that she was no longer the same person who had walked out of town feeling lost and afraid. She was beginning to heal, and the mountains were helping her discover who she truly was. The young woman was walking along a narrow trail when she first saw the small figure moving in the distance. She stopped and squinted through the trees, trying to see more clearly. It was a man, and he seemed to be tending to a small garden near a wooden cabin. The sight made her heart race with curiosity and caution. She had not seen another person in weeks, and the thought of approaching someone filled her with both hope and fear. She watched him quietly from behind a tree, trying to decide what to do. The man was older than she had expected, and his movements were slow but deliberate. He carried a basket of vegetables from the garden to the cabin and then returned to the plants with care and attention. She noticed the way he seemed to know every inch of the land and how comfortable he looked in the mountains. His presence was calming and reassuring in a way she had not felt in a long time. She wanted to meet him, but she also worried he might not welcome a stranger. After a while, she decided to step out from her hiding place. She took a deep breath and walked slowly toward the cabin, keeping her hands visible and her movements gentle. The man looked up and paused. His eyes were curious, but not unfriendly. He did not speak at first, and she hesitated, unsure of what to say or how he would react. Finally, she spoke in a soft voice, introducing herself and explaining that she had been traveling through the mountains. She told him a little about her journey, but left out the painful details that had driven her away from the town. The man listened quietly, nodding and offering small smiles of understanding. She felt a strange relief in his calm presence. She sensed that he did not judge her, and that gave her courage to continue speaking. He invited her to sit near the cabin and offered her some water and a small piece of bread. She accepted and felt a warmth in her chest that she had not felt for a long time. They talked about simple things at first: the weather, the land, and the animals around them. The man spoke with care and patience, sharing his knowledge of the mountains, how to live off the land. She listened intently, absorbing every civil word and feeling grateful for his willingness to teach her. Over the next few days, she returned to the cabin each morning to help him with small tasks. He showed her how to gather firewood, how to tend the garden, and how to identify edible plants and herbs. She was a quick learner, and the man seemed pleased with her progress. He never rushed her or made her feel inadequate. She realized that this was the first time in a long time that someone had treated her with kindness without expecting anything in return. The young woman began to feel a connection to the man that was deeper than friendship. It was a sense of trust and respect that made her feel safe and valued. She shared small stories about her past and he shared memories of his life and the woman he had lost. She listened carefully and felt a sense of empathy for his grief. She realized that they were both people who had known pain and loss, and that shared experience created a bond. Between them, they spent hours working together in the garden or chopping wood. The young woman began to notice small details about the man, the way he smiled when he saw the first shoots of new plants, the way he hummed quietly while working, and the way he paused to watch the sun rise over the mountains. Each of these details made her feel closer to him and more connected to the life she was building in the mountains. One day they went further into the forest to gather herbs for cooking. The man showed her how to identify the leaves and roots that were safe to eat and how to prepare them. For meals, she felt a sense of pride in learning skills that were both practical and meaningful. The experience also brought them closer together. She learned to trust his guidance, and he learned to trust her instincts and judgment as the weeks passed. Their routines became intertwined. She would wake early and help him with chores, and he would teach her new skills along the way. They shared meals by the fire and spoke of dreams and hopes for the future. They laughed together at small mistakes and celebrated the successes that came from their teamwork. She felt a sense of belonging and purpose that she had never experienced before, though. Young woman also noticed that her confidence and self-esteem were growing. She could see her reflection in the stream and recognize a person who was stronger and more capable than she had realized. She began to stand taller and walk with a steadier pace. She felt a sense of pride in her accomplishments and in the person she was becoming. She understood that the healing she had been seeking was happening slowly through the simple acts of living and connecting with another human being. One evening, they sat by the fire watching the sun dip behind the mountains. The young woman thought about how far she had come from the town that had sent her away in shame. She realized that meeting the man had been a turning point in her journey. She had found someone who could guide her and support her without judgment. She felt a deep sense of gratitude for his patience and understanding. The man shared stories of his past, the life he had lived with the woman he had loved, and the hardships he had endured alone in the mountains. She listened with empathy and admiration. She realized that he had faced his own pain and loss with courage and resilience. She felt inspired by his strength and began to see that healing was possible even after great suffering. They began to plan small projects together, repairing parts of the cabin and building simple tools to make life easier. The young woman enjoyed learning how to make practical things, and the man appreciated her willingness to help. She felt a sense of accomplishment and usefulness that she had not felt in a long time. Each task they completed together strengthened their bond and created a shared sense of purpose. The young woman also began to explore her own emotions and thoughts. She wrote in a small notebook. She carried her reflections on the mountains, the people she had left behind. In the journey she was on, she discovered feelings of hope and resilience alongside sadness and fear. She realized that being vulnerable was part of healing and that sharing her thoughts with the man helped her process them. They took long walks through the forest, observing the changing seasons and the behavior of animals. She learned how to read signs in nature and anticipate changes in weather. She felt a growing sense of harmony with the land and with the life she was building. She also learned to appreciate quiet moments of reflection and the beauty of solitude when shared with someone who understood. The young woman discovered that she could laugh freely, feel joy without fear of judgment. She began to trust her instincts and make decisions confidently. She realized that the mountains had taught her patience and self-reliance, and that meeting the man had taught her trust and companionship. She felt a balance between independence and connection that was new and reassuring. Over time, she felt less burdened by the shame that had driven her away from the town. She realized that the opinions of others did not define her worth. She began to embrace her own strengths and abilities and to see herself as capable of creating a fulfilling life. The mountains and the man had become sources of strength and inspiration. The young woman and the man continued to build a life together in the mountains. Each day brought new challenges and opportunities for learning. She discovered joy in small accomplishments and a sense of peace in the rhythm of daily life. She felt a growing sense of belonging and acceptance. She knew that she had found a place where she could heal and grow, and that the bond she had formed with the man was helping her discover the person she truly was. The young woman began to feel more comfortable living in the mountains each day. She woke with the sun and moved quietly through the forest, helping with chores and learning more from the man who had welcomed her into his life. He continued to teach her how to live off the land and how to make use of simple materials to improve their cabin and surroundings. She paid close attention to his guidance and felt a sense of accomplishment with every new skill she mastered. She learned to collect herbs for medicine and cooking. She learned how to weave small baskets from reeds and how to mend worn clothing. She discovered the art of making simple tools from stones and wood. She felt a sense of pride in being able to provide for herself, and in helping maintain the cabin, she realized that these small acts were building her confidence and making her feel capable and independent. The young woman began to notice a shift in her emotions. She felt less burdened by fear and shame and more open to the world around her. She started to appreciate the quiet moments when she could sit by the stream or watch the sun rise over the peaks. She felt connected to the land and to the life she was creating. She understood that healing was not something that happened all at once, but something that grew slowly through daily effort and reflection. The man continued to share stories from his past. He spoke of the woman he had loved and the life they had shared before she had passed away. He told her about the challenges he had faced and how he had learned to find peace in the mountains alone. The young woman listened with empathy and found comfort in his honesty. She realized that both of them had experienced pain and loss, and that this shared understanding was helping them bond. They spent long hours working together on small projects. She helped repair the roof of the cabin and learned how to reinforce the walls with natural materials. They cleared paths through the forest and created small gardens to grow vegetables and herbs. She found joy in seeing the results of their hard work and in knowing that they were building a life together that was safe and sustainable. A young woman also discovered the value of quiet reflection. She spent time alone in the forest, observing the birds and animals and listening to the wind. Moving through the trees, she wrote in her small notebook, recording her thoughts and feelings about the mountains and the life she was building. She discovered that writing helped her understand herself and process the emotions she had carried for so long. She felt a growing sense of trust in the man. He never judged her and treated her with respect and kindness. She realized that she could speak freely and share her thoughts without fear of criticism. He listened patiently and offered gentle guidance when needed. She began to feel a sense of security and belonging that she had not known before. The young woman also began to explore her creativity. She used natural materials to make small decorations for the cabin and experimented with cooking new meals using the herbs and vegetables they had collected. She discovered a sense of joy in creating and in seeing the beauty in simple things. She realized that the mountains provided not only survival, but also inspiration and the chance to develop her own skills and talents. Their relationship grew stronger each day. They shared laughter and stories and worked side by side to maintain their home. She felt a deep sense of connection to the man and began to understand that healing was possible through trust and companionship. She realized that the bond they were forming was helping her rebuild her sense of self and find peace after the shame she had experienced in her old town. The young woman also faced moments of doubt and fear. She wondered if she would ever be able to face the world outside the mountains again. She thought about the town she had left and the people who had shamed her. She felt the old pain, but also recognized that she had grown stronger. She reminded herself that her healing was her own and that she could not let past judgments control her future. She learned to face her fears with courage and to focus on the present moment. One morning they went to a high peak to gather herbs. She looked out over the mountains, stretching endlessly in every direction. She felt a sense of awe and freedom. She realized that the mountains had become a place of safety and learning. She felt gratitude for the man who had guided her and for the opportunity to discover her own strength and resilience. They worked together to build small tools and improve their living space. She learned to create simple traps for catching small animals and to preserve food for longer periods. She felt a sense of pride in her growing abilities and in the life they were creating. She understood that survival required patience and attention, and that each skill she learned was a step toward independence and confidence. The young woman also found comfort in the daily routines they shared. She enjoyed preparing meals together and sharing stories by the fire. She felt a sense of community and companionship that had been missing from her life. She realized That healing was not only about being alone, but also about connecting with someone who understood and respected her. She felt a growing sense of belonging and trust. She began to notice changes in her own behavior and emotions. She felt calmer and more confident. She could handle challenges without panic and found joy in small accomplishments. She realized that the mountains had taught her patience and resilience, and that her relationship with the man had taught her trust and empathy. Felt a balance between independence and companionship that gave her strength and peace. The young woman continued to explore her surroundings. She discovered small valleys and streams where she could rest and observe the natural world. She learned to read signs in the environment and anticipate changes in weather. She felt a growing sense of harmony with the land and with herself. She realized that the mountains were helping her heal not only physically but emotionally and spiritually. They spent evenings by the fire talking about the future and their hopes. She shared her dreams and fears, and the man offered guidance and support. She felt encouraged to pursue her own goals and to continue learning and growing. She realized that healing was a journey, and that having someone to share it with made it easier and more meaningful. The young woman also discovered moments of joy and laughter. She found pleasure in the simple things in life, in observing animals in the forest and cooking a new meal, or in successfully completing a task. She realized that happiness could exist alongside pain, and that healing did not mean forgetting the past, but learning to live with it and grow from it. She continued to write in her notebook, recording her thoughts and experiences. She reflected on the changes she had noticed in herself and the lessons she had learned. She felt a sense of accomplishment and clarity. She realized that the mountains had become a place of transformation, and that her relationship with the man was helping her embrace a new life full of possibility and hope. The young woman felt a growing sense of connection and purpose. She understood that her healing was a process, and that each day brought new opportunities to learn and grow. She felt grateful for the mountains for providing a safe space, and for the man for offering guidance and companionship. She realized that through patience, trust, and effort, she was becoming stronger and more confident, and that her past mistakes did not define her. As the days passed, she continued to build skills, confidence, and trust. She found comfort in the mountains and joy in the work they did together. She understood that healing was gradual and required dedication. She felt a sense of peace in knowing that she could rely on herself and that she had someone to support her. She realized that she was no longer defined by the shame that had sent her away, but by the strength and resilience she had discovered within herself. The young woman woke to the soft glow of morning light filtering through the trees. She felt the cool breeze on her skin and the steady rhythm of her heart. She had grown accustomed to the sounds of the mountains and the gentle pace of life that surrounded her. She rose and began her morning routine, moving through the forest with ease and confidence. She checked the small garden they had planted and gathered herbs for cooking and medicine. She felt a sense of pride and connection to the land that had become her home. The man joined her quietly, and together they worked in harmony. She noticed how naturally their movements complemented each other as they prepared food and maintained the cabin. She realized that the bond they had formed had become a foundation for both their lives. They shared tasks and knowledge without expectation or judgment, creating a partnership built on trust and understanding. As the weeks turned into months, the young woman continued to discover more about herself and her abilities. She learned to track animals for food and to use natural materials to build and repair tools. She discovered that she could solve problems quickly and adapt to challenges with patience and creativity. Each new skills she mastered gave her confidence and reinforced the sense that she was capable of creating a meaningful life in the mountains. She spent time reflecting on her past experiences and the journey that had brought her here. She remembered the shame and judgment that had driven her from her town and compared it to the freedom she now felt. She understood that the mountains were not just a place to hide, but a place to grow and heal. She felt gratitude for the lessons she had learned and for the resilience she had discovered within herself. The man shared more stories from his life and experiences in the mountains. He spoke of the struggles he had faced and how he had learned to find peace and purpose even in solitude. The young woman listened with empathy and felt a sense of connection to his journey. She realized that both of them had endured hardship and that their shared understanding was helping them build a new life together. They spent long days exploring the surrounding forests and valleys, discovering new sources of food and materials for their cabin. She learned to navigate difficult terrain and to anticipate weather changes. She felt a growing sense of harmony with the land and the rhythms of nature. She began to recognize the beauty in each season and in the subtle changes that marked the passage of time. The young woman also developed a deeper sense of self through reflection and observation. She wrote in her notebook, regularly documenting her thoughts and experiences. She recorded moments of joy and accomplishment, as well as challenges and lessons learned. She discovered that writing helped her process emotions and maintain clarity and focus. She felt that her inner world was becoming more balanced and peaceful. She began to notice changes in her emotional responses. She felt calmer and more confident in her decisions. She could face difficulties without panic and approach new challenges with curiosity and determination. She realized that the healing she had sought was taking place gradually through daily practice and the support of the man who had welcomed her into his life. Their relationship grew stronger with each passing day. They shared laughter and quiet moments by the fire. They supported each other in tasks and celebrated small achievements together. The young woman felt a sense of belonging and security that had been missing from her life. She understood that true connection was based on mutual respect and empathy, and that this bond was helping her heal from the pain of her past. The young woman also began to explore her creativity and problem-solving abilities. She experimented with new ways to cook meals using herbs and vegetables and found satisfaction in preparing nourishing food. She made small improvements to the cabin and built tools to make daily tasks easier. She discovered joy in creation and in seeing the tangible results of her efforts. She continued to observe and learn from the natural world, the movements of animals, and the changes in plants. Taught her valuable lessons. She learned patience and attentiveness and discovered how to anticipate the needs of both herself and the man. She realized that living in harmony with nature required respect and understanding, and that these lessons were shaping her into a stronger and more capable person. The young woman reflected on the distance she had traveled since leaving her town. She thought about the shame and judgment that had driven her away and how different her life had become. She realized that the mountains had provided her with an opportunity to redefine herself and to embrace her own strengths. She felt a sense of empowerment in knowing that she could create a life based on her choices and values. Evenings were a time of quiet reflection and companionship. She and the man would sit by the fire, sharing stories and experiences. She felt a sense of connection and trust that allowed her to speak freely and openly. She discovered the importance of patience and understanding in relationships and the value of listening and supporting each other. The young woman also discovered joy in the small pleasures of life in the mountains. The sound of a stream flowing through the forest, the sight of birds building nests, and the warmth of the fire at night all brought a sense of contentment. She realized that happiness could be found in simple moments, and that appreciating these moments was part of her healing process. She continued to grow physically and emotionally. Her body became stronger from climbing, walking, and carrying materials. She learned to endure discomfort and adapt to changing conditions. She also felt a growing sense of emotional resilience. She could face uncertainty and challenge without fear, and could find calm and clarity in moments of difficulty. The man continued to share his wisdom and experiences. He encouraged her to trust herself and to recognize her own strengths. She felt gratitude for his guidance and support, and for the way he treated her with kindness and respect. She realized that having someone to rely on while also maintaining her independence was helping her build confidence and self-worth. Young woman began to envision a future beyond survival. She imagined a life filled with learning, creativity, and connection. She felt empowered by the knowledge and skills she had gained, and by the trust and companionship she shared with the man. She understood that healing was a journey, and that each day offered new opportunities to grow and strengthen herself. She continued to write in her notebook, recording insights, reflections, and moments of joy. She documented her evolving understanding of herself and her relationship with the mountains and the man. She found clarity in her writing and used it as a tool for self-expression and personal growth. The young woman also became more attuned to the natural world around her. She observed patterns in the movement of animals and changes in plants. She learned to predict weather and find resources in the environment. She felt a deepening connection to the mountains and a sense of belonging that went beyond human relationships. She understood that the land itself was a teacher and a source of strength. Her sense of trust and confidence continued to grow. She approached each day with curiosity and determination. She embraced challenges as opportunities to learn and celebrate small victories. She felt a growing sense of mastery over her surroundings and her own abilities. She realized that the journey she had taken from shame to healing had transformed her into a resilient and capable individual. A young woman and the man continued to live and work together in harmony. She found joy in daily routines and satisfaction in shared accomplishments. She discovered the value of patience, understanding, trust in building meaningful connections. She realized that healing was a process supported by companionship, self-reliance, and engagement with the natural world. She reflected on her journey and recognized the strength she had gained. She understood that the mountains had given her more than survival skills. They had provided a space to reflect, grow, and heal. She had learned to trust herself, to embrace her own abilities, and to find joy and purpose in simple acts. The young woman realized that she had moved beyond shame. She understood that her past did not define her and that she could create a life based on her choices and values. She felt empowered, resilient, and at peace. She had found healing and connection in the mountains and in the companionship of the man who had shared his life and wisdom with her. She understood that she was capable of building a meaningful and fulfilling life guided by strength, trust, and understanding. The young woman had grown stronger and more confident in the mountains. She moved through the forest with a sense of ease and familiarity. She had learned to rely on herself and on the guidance of the man who had welcomed her into his life. Each day brought new experiences and challenges that she approached with courage and patience. She discovered a sense of freedom and purpose in her daily tasks and in the life she had built for herself. She began to notice changes, not only in her body, but also in her mind. She could think clearly and make decisions without fear or hesitation. She approached problems creatively and found solutions that made life easier and more fulfilling. She felt a sense of pride in her accomplishments and a growing awareness of her own abilities. She understood that the mountains had taught her patience and resilience, and that the companionship of the man had taught her trust and empathy. The young woman spent mornings gathering food and resources. She learned to identify edible plants and herbs and to prepare meals that were nourishing and satisfying. She collected firewood and tended the cabin, ensuring that their home was safe and comfortable. She found joy in these routines and in the small victories that came from successfully completing tasks. She felt a sense of control over her life and a growing confidence in her own skills. The man continued to share his knowledge and experiences. She learned about the rhythms of the forest, the patterns of the animals, and the changes in weather. He taught her how to anticipate challenges and how to prepare for them. She listened attentively and absorbed every detail. She felt grateful for his patience and guidance and for the way he treated her with respect and kindness. In the afternoons, she often explored the surrounding area. She discovered hidden streams and quiet valleys where she could rest and reflect. She observed the natural world closely, learning from the movements of animals and the changes in plants. She felt a deep connection to the land and a sense of belonging. She realized that the mountains were not just a place of survival, but a place of growth and learning. She continued to write in her small notebook, recording her thoughts and experiences. She documented moments of joy and discovery, as well as challenges and lessons learned. She found that writing helped her process emotions and maintain clarity and focus. She felt that her inner world was becoming more balanced and peaceful, and that she was gaining insight into herself and her journey. The young woman and the man spent time working together on small projects. She learned to build tools and repair the cabin using natural materials. She discovered satisfaction in creating practical solutions and in seeing the results of their efforts. She felt a sense of partnership and mutual support that strengthened their bond. She realized that healing was not only about being alone, but also about connecting with someone who understood and respected her evenings were times of reflection and companionship. They would sit by the fire sharing stories and discussing their experiences. She felt a growing sense of trust and security in the presence of the man. She realized that true connection required patience, understanding, and empathy, and that their relationship was helping her heal from the pain of her past. The young woman also explored her creativity. She experimented with cooking new meals using herbs and vegetables, and found pleasure in preparing food that was both nourishing and enjoyable. She made small decorations for the cabin and found satisfaction in creating beauty from simple materials. She discovered that engaging in creative activities brought a sense of joy and accomplishment and helped her feel more connected to her environment. She reflected on her journey from the town she had left to the life she was building in the mountains. She remembered the shame and judgment that had driven her away and compared it to the sense of freedom and purpose she now felt. Realized that the mountains had provided her with an opportunity to redefine herself and to embrace her own strengths. She felt empowered and resilient and understood that her past did not define her. The young woman faced moments of fear and doubt, but learned to manage them with patience and perspective. She thought about the town and the people who had shamed her, but recognized that their opinions did not control her future. She focused on the present and on the life she was creating. She learned to trust herself and to approach challenges with confidence and determination. She continued to observe and learn from the natural world. She watched the behavior of animals and the changes in plants and used this knowledge to make life easier and safer. She felt a growing sense of harmony with the land and a deeper understanding of the interconnectedness of all living things. She realized that living in balance with nature was teaching her important lessons about patience, resilience, and respect. The young woman and the man shared responsibilities and worked side by side to maintain their home and gather resources. She discovered the value of cooperation and mutual support. She felt a sense of satisfaction in completing tasks together and in knowing that their efforts contributed to a safe and fulfilling life. She realized that building a life required both independence and connection, and that both were essential for personal growth. She spent time reflecting on her emotions and personal growth. She recognized that she had changed significantly since leaving her town. She felt stronger, more capable, and more self-aware. She had learned to manage fear and uncertainty and to find joy and satisfaction in daily tasks. She understood that healing was a gradual process that required patience, reflection, and engagement with the world around her. The young woman also discovered the importance of trust and empathy in relationships. She realized that the bond she shared with the man was helping her rebuild her sense of self and her capacity for connection. She felt safe sharing her thoughts and feelings and discovered that her experiences could be understood and respected. She understood that healing was not only personal but relational, and that connection could provide support and encouragement. She continued to explore and learn practical skills. She discovered new ways to cook and preserve food and to build and repair tools. She experimented with small projects that improved their living space and provided comfort and convenience. She felt a sense of pride and accomplishment in these efforts and recognized that practical skills were an important part of independence and self-reliance.